Yes, so I'm Virginia Woolley. You might have seen me before on these forums. So I'm the EA technical lead on PEPR. I'm just going to provide you a little bit of an update, similar to previous, but also some of the things that have happened over the last month, which some have been slightly touched on already, but I'll give you a bit more detail. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Just a bit of an update on guidance. Obviously, April was the first time that small producers needed to register and submit data under PEPR, extended producer responsibility. So we have seen lots of data come in, but just to let you know that there is a handy guide for small producers on how to comply. We also added a lot of additional detail into our agreed positions technical guidance, which is available for everyone to use in our version 6. We are already working on version 7 because we appreciate all the queries coming in, and that's helping us to think about what additional guidance might be needed where people might not be sure on how to comply. But just a reminder, who a small producer is. It's set out in the regulations and in the guidance, but if you do have an annual turnover between £1 and £2 million and you supply over 25 tonnes of packaging in the UK, or if you have an annual turnover of over £1 million and you supply between 25 and 50 tonnes of packaging in the UK, then you are a small producer, and therefore you need to register annually and you need to submit annual data as well. So please make sure to have a look at those thresholds if you think you may fall in those categories. We also have published the UK aggregated packaging data. So once all the data comes in, we do some checking and things like that, and then we do publish it periodically, the full data set of the aggregated data that's been submitted. That's broken down by material and packaging type, and it's also split between large producers and small producers, and there's drinks container information on there as well. So if you're interested in looking at the UK-wide data set, please feel free to go and have a look at that. As I say, we'll update that every 2 months because obviously people resubmit, people join the system, things like that. So it will change across the year, hence why we do the updates. So if you go on to the next slide, please. So there's been two pretty big things that have happened over the last week and a half. So we've actually published two separate regulatory position statements. All 4 regulators have published them. So in Wales, they're called a regulatory decision document. I'm just going to refer to them as an RPS for these slides. But all 4 regulators have published these. There's one on fibre-based composites, packaging material, data collection and reporting. And then we've got another one on the recyclability assessment methodology, data collection and reporting, so RAM. These are time limited. They don't apply to any other data collection and reporting obligations. So as I say, please make sure to have a read, make sure you understand the scope of what they cover, because that is all they cover and nothing else is impacted. And as I say, it covers all 4 UK nations. If we go on to the next slide, please. So the first one being about the recyclability assessment methodology. So as Ben and Margaret kind of alluded to, there was some industry concerns raised about readiness. So we've now put in a regulatory position statement so that if producers who are required to do recyclability assessments and submit the data, if you don't need to submit H1 2025 RAM data, or if you are going to submit it, if you miss that 1st of October deadline for your RAM data, this is just your RAM data, you'll need to submit and submit it after the 1st of October, but before the 1st of April, that's fine too. So this isn't saying that you can't submit your RAM data. If you want to submit it, you're very much welcome to continue complying with the regulations as written. But if you're not ready to submit the H1 RAM data by the 1st of October deadline, this means we wouldn't look to take enforcement action against you for not complying with that requirement. As I say, it only applies to H1 RAM data, so that's your January to June 2025 data. Your July to December data must be submitted in line with the regulations, so it doesn't apply to that. There is a separate requirement to the RAM, which is to split for large producers to divide some of their plastic packaging into rigid and flexible packaging in their reporting. That applies to household packaging and public bin. I think we've had a few questions about conflating the 2 requirements. This is a separate requirement and therefore is still in force. So if in your H1 2025 data, Large producers must split out their plastic packaging reporting into rigid or flexible categories, and that is on household packaging and public bin packaging. The regulatory position statement is published, so please feel free to go and have a read, and obviously send across any questions you might have. It should be read in conjunction with a statement that was issued by the scheme administrator, so by PAC UK, who have outlined how this would then affect your disposal fee when it comes to modulated fees. So I'd really recommend you read both things in conjunction with each other, just to make sure you're really clear on the impact of not submitting your H1 RAM data. So that's that RPS. If you want to go on to the next slide, please. The next one is fibre-based composites, so FBCs. So that's fibre-based composites were a new material introduced by PEPR. That there is a definition that currently people are reporting against. That definition is going to change slightly for various reasons. And that comes into force when the amending regulations come into force, which should be in January. But before those come into force, this RPS means that you can follow the new definition in your 2025 data, even though that isn't what's in the regulations. So if you choose to align with the new definition, we wouldn't take enforcement action. That doesn't mean you can't use the old definition, but it does mean that you can use this revised definition before it comes into force in January. It essentially means that where you have a fibre-based composite that has plastic layers that are that make up less than 5% or less of the mass, you can report that as paper and board. It aligns much more closely with what's in the RAM as well. So hopefully it makes it a lot more consistent across the piece. If you want to, as I say, it's been published, so if you want to read the full definition and the changes, please feel free to go and have a look at that as well. And say it's in across the whole of the UK. So the link that I think is going to be shared, that will be the Environment Agency's RPS, but there will be the equivalent in the other nations as well. Okay, I go on to the next slide, please. Just a bit of an update on what we're up to. We are still continuing to check 2024 data. We had obviously a lot come in April. We had the small producer data, compliance scheme data, member data. We had registrations. There was a lot of data that came in. We've made really good headway with it, but we're also still getting resubmissions. So we're going to keep working through all that information and making sure we are monitoring that it's accurate as reasonably possible. We're undertaking on-site and desktop audits. We are continually increasing the frequency of these. So you may get contacted at some point that we want to come out to your site and review your activities and ensure that you're reporting correctly. So we're continuously, that's going to continue all throughout the year. We're working really closely with PAC UK, especially with them standing up these new groups, so the technical advisory committee and things like that. We want to make sure we work really closely with PAC UK so that we can provide consistent advice on implementing EPR or PPR. And we're still working very closely with other regulators. We want to make sure that we're all clear on the positions that we set out. This is why we keep updating our green positions guidance. And all four of the nation's regulators, we're continuing to address queries that are coming in. The Environment Agency have already addressed over 850 technical queries, and we're continuing to answer them as quickly as we can. But please be patient because, as I say, we do get a lot coming in. And we're bringing free riders into compliance. So it's a really positive picture across the piece in terms of our activity ramping up, and we'll continue to do so. So you should see us a lot, either coming out on audits, getting questions about your data, and things like that. So we'll continue on this route. If you want to go on to the next slide, please. Oh yeah, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Zoe now, just to cover a bit about reprocessed and exporters.
Thank you, Virginia. Hi everyone, I'm Zoe Clark. I lead for reprocessors and exporters under PEPR within the Environment Agency. So as you can see from the slide, we have just published guidance for reprocessors and exporters of UK packaging waste. That came out yesterday. We will pop the link in the chat for you, and you may have received an email with the link earlier today, and it will be shared in future newsletter releases too, so should be plenty of ways for you to access that. This is joint guidance from DEFRA and all four regulators. It covers changes to registration and accreditation from 2025 to 26, who needs to register and who needs to apply for accreditation, the timelines for your applications, charges, regulatory requirements and how to comply, recording and reporting requirements, national protocols, agency agreed industry grades and site specific protocols, and also evidence for overseas reprocessing sites. So it is a fairly comprehensive piece of guidance. Also to say sampling and inspection plan templates should be published imminently. And again, that link will be shared. These plans must be completed when you apply for registration, which is mandatory, and if you apply for accreditation, which is optional. Sampling and inspection plans help us understand how you determine the amount of UK packaging waste received for recycling at each of your sites or exported for recycling. And it's just worth mentioning there are different forms, whether you are a reprocessor or an exporter, and different forms for registration and accreditation. So it may be that you need to fill in multiple forms, and please just make sure that you use the correct ones. The guidance I've outlined will be updated over the coming months, and we'll let you know when that happens and what has changed, what those updates are. When you do read the guidance, there is a link at the bottom for feedback. Please use this. We welcome any feedback and we will review it all when it comes in. So you can see there's a bit of a timeline on the slide here. You must apply for registration. As I say, that's mandatory by the 1st of October 2025. A reminder that that window should open at the start of September, so you should have about a month to submit your application and pay your application charges before that 1st of October deadline. If you do start recycling or exporting after the deadline, please register within 28 days of starting your activity. Once you're registered, you're kind of in the system, you won't need to reapply in future years, but you will now need to pay subsistence fees and keep your registration updated with any changes that occur. If you want to apply for accreditation, as I say, that is optional, but it gives you the ability to then issue PRNs and PERNs. If you want to do that from the 1st of January 2026, you will need to apply again by the 1st of October 2025. You can apply for accreditation at any point through the year, but just to note, you can only issue PRNs and PERNs from the date that your application is determined until the end of the calendar year, and then you need to reapply and pay for accreditation each year. Regulators have 12 weeks to determine your applications, just to give you an idea on timeframes there as well. If I could have the next slide, please. So what you can do to prepare, I'd recommend you go away, read the guidance, and yeah, as I say, submit any queries that you have and we can help you with that. And as I said, the sampling and inspection plan templates will be published very, very soon too. So we will make sure you have those as soon as possible. You could start thinking about who will fulfill roles such as approved person. That's the person who will be responsible for submitting monthly, quarterly, annual reports and submitting your applications for accreditation. And you could consider which overseas reprocessing sites you want to register. Just note you'll need to register all the sites you plan to use, even if you aren't planning to apply for accreditation of those sites. So yeah, I would just recommend starting to check that you've got paperwork to support your application, and hopefully the guidance that's been published will help you to do that. We are working to get guidance on how to actually complete and submit your registration and accreditation applications to you as soon as possible, and we will of course let you know once that information is available.